Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, so today we're very pleased to have Francois Morin visiting us from École Polytechnique. He'll speak to us on advances in the CM method for elliptic curves. Francois is well known for his work in computational number theory over the last several decades. He was one of the first implementers of the CM method for generating elliptic curves for various purposes, including in the elliptic curve primality proving algorithm, and he holds the world record for largest provable prime proved. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Christine. So you see, I've put all of my sponsors here, and you see in France we are forced to have many sponsors, and they change their logo every time. So yeah, okay. You are not. Just invited me. If you want to sponsor me, then we can discuss. Okay, and so I'm currently in sabbatical at University of Waterloo, so I put them also. Okay, so I'd like to give you an overview of what the CM method is and what it is useful for, and what are some recent sub-algorithms, so to speak, that can be used to speed that method. And I ask some questions, and then I will briefly describe what I have no time to tell you about. So this is just, so several decades means at most 2 decades for me. That's okay, 2 decades. We'll have to make a party about this anyway. So elliptic curves, they pre-exist. They have a long history in math. And in computational number theory, that's easy. We just all believe that Ronne-Strophes algorithm for computing the cardinality of elliptic curves over finite fields is the start of all this business. So this algorithm was kind of new at the time, and maybe the thing that started the use of elliptic curves in crypto and so on is the Lenz-Straz factorization algorithm, which is called ECM, which was basically the first real use of elliptic curves in that area. And you see that around 85, 86, many people were aware of these 2 works. And not very surprisingly, this led to this idea that maybe they could be used in crypto also. And 2 people independently invented, so to speak, elliptic curve cryptography, Victor Miller and Neil Kobitz, who is not too far from here in the University of Washington. And so at the same time, there were many people trying to do primality proving. So here I listed some names. The Chudnovsky brothers were in fact the first to try to do some primality, some big primes, like Mersenne primes, with simple, the most simple cases of CM curves. Vib Bosma, he began also by studying the first 2 cases of primality proving. And then Atkin gave the general method to do that, and then I later joined the gang a little after that. And at the same time, it was realized that maybe this problem, this complexity problem, determining whether a given integer is prime or not, could be proven in RP. It cannot be done directly with elliptic curves because we cannot prove things. It's true, everybody knows it's true, but we cannot prove it. And the first real proof that this problem is in RP was done by Edelman and Wang, and using hyperelliptic curves instead of elliptic curves. So this is for the theoretical part. And at the same time, so we were doing primality proving, and there was the connex problem, which is trying to compute the cardinality of an elliptic curve or a finite field from a practical point of view, that attracted many people and came up with ideas by Elkis and Atkin and Cycles and Volcanos and whatever after that, so that we can now compute some cardinalities of some elliptic curves. And so you see there's a kind of mixing between crypto and pure, so to speak, computational number theory, And nowadays, most uses are in crypto. We can use pair singular curves and build them as CM curves. And there are many other applications. And the most recent is the use of pairings. Yes, first question. You'll see a volcano at the end of my talk. So this is an incentive for you to stay. Okay, so just for easy of presentation, I will stick to things being defined over some large prime finite field. So most of what I will be talking about can be generalized to, say, characteristic 2, but I'll stick to this, which is the case for primality proving anyway. So what's the problem? The problem is that sometimes when you run algorithms to build special objects for crypto, you need a lot of elliptic curves and a lot of their properties. And it's not obvious to compute the cardinality of an elliptic curve. The only method we have, basically for the large prime case, is Ropes' algorithm, and it's too slow, just too slow. I mean, the record for this is 2,500 decimal digits. We don't need that for crypto, but even if you look at crypto sizes, that's too slow. Imagine you have to find a curve whose cardinality is a prime, then you have to select the curve, compute its cardinality, and at the end say, oh, no, it's not prime, and come back. So that takes too long. So the idea is to use CM curves, which are very special. So let's make a digression. In what circumstances can I write a prime P as a sum of two squares, for instance? So the answer dates back to Fermat. It says, okay, P is congruent to 1 mod 4. Now suppose I generalize this. When can I write a prime as this form? So that's a theoretical problem that was solved only at the end of the 19th century, and it's not obvious. And yet it has a connection with elliptic curves. Maybe some 50 years later, it was shown that if your prime can be written like this, then you can associate to him an elliptic curve over the same finite field, which has this cardinality. So you see, you replace some random curves for which you cannot compute the cardinality by some conditions on P, your favorite prime, and you say, if I can write it like this, I can have an elliptic curve whose cardinality I know. So this is the essence of the CM method, is exploit this, use the results of Weber, Tagaki, Kronecker, all these people, and try to use it for doing this construction of curves. So what are the applications of this? So the first one was primality proving. This was invented by Atkin for this reason. So I don't know if it used to be a killer application, as you might say. It's probably no longer a killer application. Nobody cares about primes anyway. So that's fun. You can make records and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, you cannot make money out of it, which was one of my dreams. But I mean, I'm still poor anyway. So, but I can write papers, which is interesting. So primality proving, I said ECPP, and apparently it's used also in the elliptic version of AKS, which are called X, whatever. And the practicality of which is not very clear at that moment. Still less slower than ECPP, but as usual, I mean, AKS and EX, they all have this property that you can prove that it works. I cannot prove that ECPP works, but it works. Okay, so it's not the first time in computational number theory where you have two kinds of algorithms, one which is proven deterministic polynomial and doesn't work in practice, and the other one, you know nothing about it, but it works. So that's life. So I gave some applications outside of primality proving a long time ago, 91. An interesting problem, except that it was an example where the CM method could be used without any reference to primality proving. So there's another application by Regnier which says, okay, give me a cardinality, I will build you a finite field and give you the curve with this cardinality. Cannot be used as is in primality proving, but in some cases. And now the killer application, that's it, building pairing-friendly curves for crypto applications. So I won't tell you about a single thing about this. There's a huge survey paper on pairing friendly curves by Freeman, Scott, and Teske. So everything is in there, all constructions. And they all need at some point the CM method. So just a few remarks. So in my view, there are two different contexts. Either I do ECPP or I do crypto. For crypto, you see primes are small, but are primes, in the sense that you give me as an input a number that is prime. In ECPP, I want to prove that n is prime, but I'm not sure it's prime. So it causes some problems here and there, and you have to prove everything you do, basically. Here you can just do the computations and say, okay, that's a field. I don't need to prove. So apart from this, the sizes, here in crypto, 200 bits, ECPP at least 30,000 bits. So the arithmetic you need here enters in the performance of your program. So you have to be careful. And also a difference here, basically, D, the discriminant that will appear next, is given. I cannot do nothing. I have to do with it. In ECPP, I can choose my discriminant. But I mean, maybe these are just technical remarks. But sometimes I will say, okay, in CM, this will happen. In ECPP, this will happen. And we'll see the differences. So now I have to do some math to just give you an idea of what's going on. So suppose I want to represent my prime as a sum of two squares, and which means I have to study this field, Q of I, where I is the root of unity. And when you have a quadratic field K of discriminant, for instance, -4 here, you can play with orders. Orders are just generated by the generator of the ring of integers. So you don't need to know this, but just to fix ideas, something like this, for instance, if you want. And orders are described by their discriminants or by their conductor. And so this amounts to write an auxiliary D as m squared times dk, where dk is the discriminant of the field. So take this example just for the record. I have here a discriminant -4, and the ring of integers of this is the principal order. And so I ask the question, when is P representable by the form u squared minus dv squared? And the answer is given by class field theory, which is a result of many work in the 19th century. And it tells you that P is representable as I want if and only if it splits in some extension field K. And this K here can be generated by the adjunction of the value of this singular invariant here. You have some prescribed series, which is called a modular invariant, and you plug in it this value Q. This gives you an algebraic integer, and it has a miraculous properties, and you can use it to represent your field here. So I translated an easy-to-state problem, like I want to represent my prime as a sum of two squares in something nobody understands, which is building this Hilbert class field. Anyway, we know how to compute J, and that's what is important here. And so the fundamental theorem, just look at this here, is that you can represent P as this expression here, if and only if D is a square mod P, and a miraculous polynomial H splits mod P. So I have now an answer, and even an algorithmic answer. If I can represent P like this, and this I can detect by this and other methods, then I can build an elliptic curve, maybe, which has the required cardinality. So just to stick with our easy example, 4P can be written as sum of squares here. There's a special case of 2, which is not important for us, or P congruent to 1 mod 4. And obviously, this was very brief. So there are many standard books containing results about complex multiplication and so on. So there's a famous book by Cox, And if you want, you can go back to one of the first lecture notes in math, 21, describing many more things. So just to give you examples of what happens. So we have to understand this polynomial here. There's some algorithm to compute it. And I give you here some first values of these polynomials. So you see that everything is okay. It's simple. For -3, this is just x. For -4, it's x minus 12 cubed. And rapidly, you have big polynomials. And each time, so you see, 23 is small, but the 8 here is very large. So that's a problem. We will have to find against this. And I will come back to this later on. So now let's describe what the CM method could be. So there are probably many variants of this. I just described 2 of them. Let's say what maybe is important for crypto. Input is a field, a discriminant, and 2 integers u and v such that p is equal to this. And I want a curve whose cardinality is this. And I added the sentence, a proof of correctness. So proofs are becoming to be important in our field. So sometimes you need proofs, or at least certificates, which is a variant of proofs. Something that can convince you that's true. So if you think about it, that's not easy. Because, okay, I can do all the computations and tell you, okay, this is your answer. How do you check it? So here it's not completely impossible to check because you see, you know the elliptic curve, you are supposed to know how to compute, find points, multiply points on the elliptic curve. And at least I want that if I take a point at random here, multiply it by m, that it's 0. That's a good start for a number to be the cardinality of some group. It has to satisfy the Lagrange theorem. But then if you go deeper into this, how do I prove that a group has a given cardinality? And the classical answer to this is you have to find the Smith's normal form of some matrix related to E, or you have to find generators of this guy. And then you can enter endless trouble because here I have no clue that m can be factored. If I cannot factor m, then I cannot find generators. Even if I can factor m, I'm not sure to find generators. If you want complexity there, I cannot prove that I can find generators of an elliptic curve in, I don't know, deterministic polynomial time. Cannot prove it. And then even if sometimes the structure of the group also is not as easy as one could think of. Maybe it's not cyclic, for instance, so you need 2 generators. So you have to prove that 2 generators are independent. So you can have a lot of trouble here. And in primality proving, what happens is that you build a huge elliptic curve. And in fact, the proof of the primality proof gives you a proof that the cardinality is what you say it is. Okay? So that might not be trivial. A variant of this, so this is not satisfactory from a theoretical point of view. It's not well defined, this in particular. Those of you who know about isogeny, that I can give you a curve which is isogenous. So the output is not clearly defined. So maybe the most precise variant would be this one. I input the same thing, but now I want a proof that the curve here I give you has complex multiplication by the order I told you it has. And so, again, this is not completely obvious. And again, volcanoes. And I will come back to volcanoes later on.
Sorry, Francois. On the previous slide, the last line. So
yes.
The correctness that you're trying to prove is that the E that you output actually has order m?
Yes.
So, and did you think about that trick of Mastra that trying to prove it
sure.
From there?
But I mean, you have to know something about the factors of m at some point. And the Mestre algorithm is not guaranteed to terminate. Okay.
So it uses the factorization.
It does not really use a factorization, but I mean, you cannot prove that it works in polynomial time. Okay. If you don't have luck, you can spend quite a lot of time finding points. I'm not sure what Mestre algorithms give you. I mean, it's absolutely not deterministic anyway. And polynomial time, I'm not sure. I mean, the best proof is I give you the generators. Except, I mean, if the curve is not cyclic, then I have to prove you that the 2 points are independent. Okay, so you can do that with pairings. Okay, but it's
Why 2 points here? Here you're just talking about the cardinality of the curve, right?
it depends. I mean, you cannot prove that M is good if you cannot prove the structure of E.
So you mean like a point on the curve and a point on its twist or something like that?
If the order is large enough. Okay? I mean, if I can... it's... okay, we can discuss that later, because otherwise... okay, there's some more work to be done. Okay, so what is a CM function that implements more or less what I've told you about? First thing is that there is this polynomial hd of x. You have to compute it in some ways. You have to find the root of it mod p. Once you have a root, you have to find an equation for E. And maybe there are some twists to consider. And you have to prove that he has a good cardinality. So this is the basic scheme. So what can we say? I won't tell you about this because, you see, ask Christine and René. And you also had a talk by Andrew Sutherland last year, so don't need to repeat it. It's supposed to be fast, in the sense that the height of this guy is almost d. You have a method in O d1 plus epsilon, so it's supposed to be optimal and problem is solved. Obviously, no, but I mean, for my talk, that's solved. Okay, find the root of this. So this is a classical problem in computational number theory. Give me a polynomial over a finite field, give me its roots. So there are many tricks for doing this. I'm using also Galois theory because I know the Galois group. I can split the extension into smaller sub-extensions and to speed up things, but it's already described in many papers, so I don't want to insist on that. And that's, so to speak, standard. So like using the Berlekamp, Cantor-Zassenhaus algorithm, and things like this. Here, there's a technical problem to get rid of twists. There's a recent paper by Rubin and Silverberg. Not completely convinced it can be used easily. I'm still working on this. I could comment later on this, but I have no definite answer about this. And here you can have parametrizations. You can look for different parametrization of elliptic curves to have a fast verification of this key equation, so to speak. So I will insist basically on something which replaces one, or at least which replaces a j here by something else, and comment on step 4 later. So I told you that we have a problem with these huge class polynomials because they just have 2 big coefficients. So the idea is to try to replace j by something smaller. So typical example, I start with the value of j at square root of -2. Can be computed to be 8,000. And if I select an equation at random, a degree 3 equation at random like this one, then I can find a root here which is smaller. So of course this is not a random equation, and I have to show you it's not random and that it can be used. But at least 64 is less than this guy. So there's hope I can do something. So this is not a random equation because it has something to do with modular equations and modular curves. And this is a model for x0 of 2. So the idea from a very high point of view is say, okay, I replace 2 by something else, and it works the same. This is what we are going to do. So just to put it more symbols, you define this congruent subgroup, and you look for functions that are more or less invariant by all 2x2 matrices mod n defined by this relation. So this writing here means that I consider all 2x2 matrices of this determinant 1 for which this coefficient b is congruent to 0 mod n for some fixed n. And what interests us here is this result here, that each time you have a function for this subgroup gamma 0 of n, there is some modular equation which relates the function to j. So you see, we just want to generalize this. This is a modular equation, and this is for gamma 0 of 2. So question, how can I find functions that are defined over, that are modular functions for this subgroup, work out the modular equation, and what is the relationship with my original problem? So first of all, I can answer the question, what is a small invariant, as we call them. So suppose I give you a polynomial in 2 variables. I know some value, and I want to say something on the other root. So just to be a little more precise here, I give you a polynomial in 2 variables, and I instantiate one of them. So I know y0. What is the size of x? Okay. So rule of thumb here is you write the dominant term here, and there is some other dominant term with y0, maybe. So if you want all these guys to cancel, then you have that the largest power here must match, up to a certain point, some power here. And this is what is made precise by the theorem of Hendry and Silverman, which tells you that the size of a solution of this equation, call it x0, is kind of proportional to the size of your input root, y0, and the coefficient of proportionality is the ratio of the 2 degrees, up to some such factor here. So the quality of an invariant, or its size, will be given by this quantity here. So take a j, for instance, then you have a ratio of 1. If you come back to my expression here, you have a degree 3 here, a degree 1 here, so the coefficient is 1/3. So 1/3 is good. And maybe we can do better. So now it's time to give you functions that can be used. And in general, when you play this game, you always use some combination of eta functions. So the eta functions here is Dedekind's eta function, which has this expression. You can write it as a sum if you want. And you multiply all these guys together. So you define this function g of z as a product of these quantities here. N is your parameter. This symbol means division by, we loop over divisors of n. And we have this function, and provided the RDs here, which are integers, satisfy these arithmetical conditions, then you get a good function that can be used. So you can work out the theory for all these guys. We spend a lot of time on subfamilies, like the one of Engel and Schertz, which has some parameters here, and the generalized Weber functions, which is just this, with S, some parameter which has to be carefully chosen. So we have a general family plus subfamilies that have different properties. So what is interesting here are functions which have the smallest of these coefficients c. And one way to have this is to stick to a degree in j which is 1. And this has something to do with a modular curve of genus 0. There's a finite list of this. And basically, you can take these models for these cases. So you see my first modular equation, the one I showed you before, is this one. You have the same thing for index 3, index 4. And if you end up looking at tables and or doing computations, you find these eta quotients for all cases of genus 0. And here I put the value of my coefficients. So basically this tells you that if I can use this function, then I have a very good ratio here, which is 1/36. Okay. So what is missing now is how I go from these modular equations here to numbers that I can use to replace J in this class polynomial stuff. So the missing link is something complex, which is called Shimura's reciprocity law. You can try to use it directly, but it's a case-to-case use of it. It's not simple at all. So you can have examples of this in papers by Stephen R. Hagen and G. And there are simplifications of this law that are easier to use. And there are two streams, so to speak, in this. The one by Stark and Hedgir and Villegas, or the one by Schertz. And so we can use all of this. And in fact, Schertz variant is easier to use. And this is what we did. So what is a typical theorem in this? Suppose I give you so what I call a Newman function is a product of this eta stuff. And B satisfies this equation mod n, then the value of f at the point minus b plus square root of d over 2 is a class invariant, which means that it can be used in place of j in the same algorithm. So what we did this winter is apply this and more, because this is a general result and we will extend it to all of these invariants here. Like you multiply the generalized Weber function, you put it to some power, multiply by a 24th root of unity, and you ask, when is this a good candidate? So typical results, I mean, the paper is on my web page. It's a long paper because there are many cases, in fact. And here are some simple results. For instance, and what we wanted is a uniform proof for all n's and all e's and whatever. So for instance, if n is 5 mod 12 and d not divisible by 3, then I can use this invariant wn squared. And you have also a result with a 4th root of unity, and I give you some polynomial here to show that it works. Okay, so this is to illustrate my winter work. So obviously, if you are trying to prove invariance of, if you are trying to use arithmetical conditions for Galois theory, you need to have some time. And so a good time is shoveling snow, or after shoveling snow, anyway. So that's a very peculiar shovel here, but not here to give you a talk on shovels, Canadian shovels. Interesting, but not the point. Okay, so you have more examples like this, like W3 squared here, and you have very sparse polynomials. Okay, so you cannot dream of having smaller height here than just 1 and 1. So it shows that we arrive at something. I cannot, I'm always happy to see numbers. That's okay to make theorems, but numbers are more important. So here are some of my computations. So you see, just to fix ideas, if I already gave you h minus 75 of j, this guy, and then you see that I can have a very small one here instead. Okay, now we can compare invariants. Like, okay, I have all these families of invariants. What's the best one? So you have to work out all formulas for the constants there, and you end up with this kind of table you don't have to read. And you can say something like, okay, if I can use L, then I can use L squared, and that's better. And so everything has to be used after that in programs to see if it works really or not. So in Hans 5, with Andreas, we already gave a list of the best invariants. And so we added this one, for instance, W4, can be used whenever D is 1 mod 8. And you see we have 48, which is half of 96. So we should look at this. And you have new guys. And for instance, you remember that huge function Newman 18 with all these eta quotients does 36. So here I put the inverse of C because it's more easily readable. And so the record actually is currently 72. So Renier reminded me that he proved that it cannot be larger than 96, but we have no 96 example yet. And okay, you see that 72 is much better than 1, okay, by a factor of 72. And here you have gamma 2 and gamma 3, and these are these functions that I may use later on. These are bad functions, okay? So we prefer to use functions there. So does it work in practice? So it's just to give you an idea of what happens in primality proving. It will relax you of all this Galois stuff, which is a bit fast. So I told you that primality proving is not a killer application, but still there are crazy people wanting to prove numbers to be prime. So what they do is that they take some implementation of ECPP, and when it fails, they send me the numbers. And so I do that with my programs, sometimes. It depends on my mood and the machines I have. So here, just to fix ideas I did recently, or my computers did, 3, say, large numbers with approximately 10,000 decimal digits each. So it's interesting to compare things and version of the program. So this is the most recent one. This is not too far away, and this is an old example. And you see timings are strange here. So, okay, these two are coherent and this is not. So either this number is hard, or I did something wrong in my script measuring time. Because it's a well-known NP-complete problem to measure the time spent by your programs used in a distributed way on computers you don't control. So it's an approximation anyway. So you see that the typical proof for a 10,000 decimal digit number on a cluster of AMD 64 whatever processor takes you something like 60 to 70 days. Forget about this one. And so there are two phases in primality proving. First, you have to find good candidates, discriminants, and so on. It takes you 49 days. And the proving part, which is computing all these polynomials and solving mod P and proving E, 15. So already you have a ratio of 3 between the two phases. Here I put some statistics. Okay, here are large D's and H. This answers more what we were discussing around lunch. You see, for this guy, I had these are two typical examples. And this is the one with a larger class number, and another one with a big class number. You see here examples for this guy and this guy here. So you see, this is not infrequent to have large class numbers. So this means we have to deal with polynomials of that degree, big coefficients. I didn't put the height, but it's computable. And in that part, I listed some invariants. I mean, the invariants that were used to compute more class polynomials. And I order this by the number of times they were used. Okay, so I had to compute many more polynomials. And you see that when I can use the invariant W25, then I do it, and it's small invariant. After that, you have Engelschert, and you have Newman 18, and other stuff. So almost all these are new invariants, so to speak, and they are old ones here. The same for this version of my program. And here it was a version without all the new fancy invariants. And that tells you something on the use of Engelschert and classical stuff and so on and so on. So you see here that new invariants are very, very useful, in fact. And as a last example, numerical example, I give you timings. Okay, for this discriminant, which is taken here, the Galois approach means computing all the roots of the class polynomial and computing the Galois group and so on, and cutting that into pieces takes you less than 3 hours. And when looking for root of all these guys mod p, which means solving all these degree equations, it takes you like 51,000 seconds. So you see the mod p part takes a lot more than the complex part. Not a reason not to optimize this, but in any case, I should do something about this, but I already did a lot. So, and here, this is the time needed to check the key equation of primality proving. And you see this is 300 seconds. So, okay, I can optimize this also.
So is the difference in these columns, you said that you don't use the new invariance in the third column.
Yes.
Does that account for the difference in the number of days?
No, but because you see the difference. Here I don't know really what happened. I have to check because it's very bizarre. I don't understand. I mean, we still have this 1/3 ratio. I'm pretty sure not, but I will have to check. Because, I mean, you see here, the difference between this invariant, for instance, and this one is not that important. And you see the time needed here to compute just the biggest polynomial here is nothing. Okay, so this cannot account for 16 or 15 days. So I have to check this. So that's a good question. I will check. It will be a nightmare, but it's a nightmare going through log files and trying to understand why it's slow. Okay, so too bad Peter is not here. Anyway, you'll tell him that I talk about Montgomery forms, but probably he knows. Okay, so this part, the last one, it concerns the fact that maybe the standard elliptic curve equation, which is called the Weierstrass form, is not the optimal one to perform group law operations, which is not a really new topic. And these are the newcomers, which are called twisted Edwards curves. And since I was at it, I said to myself, okay, why not try to understand all this stuff about Edwards curves? So I thought it would take me 3 days. It took me 1 month. And obviously, I hope somebody will write a paper explaining why it should not take 1 month. Anyway, so you cannot immediately recognize this is an elliptic curve. So this is not what we find in textbooks. I was discussing that with Steven Galbraith, and he told me, oh, there are some guys who want to rewrite or write elliptic curve cryptone now, starting with that equation as a definition of an elliptic curve, which is, from, I guess, the point of view of many of us, completely crazy. But it's not the first crazy thing we would see in crypto anyway. So you have, instead of having something looking like this, which is a Montgomery form, which is close to a Weierstrass form, you would have this. And the interest of this is that you have a fast group operation, or fast formulas for group operations, and you have what are called by Bernstein and Lange unified laws, addition laws, unified operations, which means that either you do the addition of 2 distinct points or doubling a point, it's the same laws. And complete means that there are no singular points at some place in the code, and that's better. And the complete form corresponds to D being not a square. And so in the literature, you have also the Montgomery form invented by Peter for doing some special operation in factorization with the ECM method. And so there are at least 2 actors here. And first thing, no, not the first thing, one of the last things that were invented by, so the first one is Bernstein, and there's Tania here, Marc Joie, cannot remember the other ones, so you can find it on the web, is that in fact you have an equivalence between these two forms. And in fact, we can prove also that one of these two forms is possible if and only if your elliptic curve has a point of order 4 on your base field. So it took some series of papers to arrive at this conclusion. And so you can draw now your own conclusions about this, to which I can add the only interesting thing, one of the things I did recently, is that suppose I ask you, give me a parametrization of curves with points of order 4. Okay, so the standard thing is to go to a model of x0 of 4, take the invariant, and that's it. So this is a parametrization in Weierstrass form of the curve you're looking for. So just parameterized by this B. And if you can put your curve in this Kubert form, then you have many miraculous properties, and you can go to Montgomery if you want, or to Edwards if you want, etc., etc. So what are the miracles here? Here I can spot points of order 2. This is not a miracle. Which is more interesting is that we have closed formulas for the abscissas of the 4 rational points. I can factor the 4th degree division polynomial. There are 2 obvious roots, as we say, 0 and this guy here. And you see that there are 2 rational points here, and maybe or maybe not other rational points, depending on the fact that 16b plus 1 is a square or not. And so when it's not a square, then you have a complete Edwards curve. And that's interesting. And if you want the relation between the 2 parts of my talk, here is one. You can compute the invariant of this curve here. You find this formula. And you make this change of variable, which is very clever, W1 over B. You end up here. And this is the modular equation for the Weber generalized, this one. And in fact, I started the other way around. I started from this, and I said, oh, okay, I can put it in the Edwards curves and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so now coming to use in CM curves. So you see, at one point, I thought that it was good to have curves in Edwards form, and I wanted to use that for primality proving. So a complete Edwards curve, again, has 1 point of order 2, and which is rational, and 1 point of order 4, which is rational. And so I tried to use that in the CM method to discover that it was almost impossible to use. In the following sense. Suppose, so this is a volcano, by the way. So at least a part of the volcano. You have to rotate it, and it's a volcano. So if you think about it, there's a direct relationship between being a 2 torsion point, or having a 2 torsion point, and having a rational 2 isogeny. And volcanoes are concerned with isogenies. Okay, so suppose 2 splits in my field, then you have the crater of the volcano here, and you have isogenies. And so if you start from a point here, it has 2 neighbors and 1 descendant, so to speak. And so this guy has 2 rational points. So it cannot be of a complete Edwards curves. But if you go down to the bottom of the volcano, then you end up here on some points here, and these guys will just have 1 isogeny going out. So they have just 2 rational torsion point, and maybe they can be of complete Edwards type. And we can prove results about this. So what are the consequences of this? In primality proving, generally speaking, we use curves that are here. I mean, we build curves that are here. So they cannot be used as is in Edwards parametrizations. And, okay, we can go down here if we want to recover good parametrizations. And now this tells you where you have to find your good examples when doing crypto-related things, if you insist. So, and it's funny because, I mean, a lot of elliptic curves having CM are not here. I mean, they are mostly here or here. And so you can prove that if you use some invariants and some discriminants and so on, that this phenomenon here is very frequent. Okay, this is all I wanted to say about this. So, conclusion, takeaways, as would say the guy of yesterday morning. New invariants are good, useful, and practical, and this is work for Renier to make them work in other contexts, like p-adic method and CRT method also, which has the same kind of problems. But they are useful. I mean, you end up with very smaller objects. New parametrizations, okay, can be used mainly in the CM context. Maybe it's more useful because there you know that P is prime. Maybe you can replace with things and so on and so on. So I don't say that Edwards curves are useless. I just say you have to be careful when using it in the CM context. And also, I mean, the obvious conclusion is that everything is trivial in genus 1. Nothing is known, or almost nothing in genus 2. I don't speak about higher genera, sorry. And that's it. More work for people to do. And I've put 2 recent preprints on this topic on my webpage. One with Andreas and the other one with myself, so that you can look at them. And thank you for your attention. And I can answer more questions if needed.
Questions? So I had one question. A few slides back, you recognized this one.
Yes.
W4 to the A.
Yes.
So then with this, does this lead you to start from an invariant like this, W4 to the A?
Yes.
And recover an
Yes.
Edwards curve
Yes.
without worrying about a twist? Or do you still have to...
Aha!
Good question. Twists are boring. I mean, in theory, a twist on twisted Edwards curves, so to speak, are related to replacing the ratio A over D by some other thing. So yeah, when you just consider invariance, I agree that you forget about twists. Okay, so the last thing I was a bit lazy to describe is how you get the good twist in this. Okay, so it might be tricky. And so I discussed that with Stephen Galbraith. He has written a paper on Edwards twists. I mean, a page on this. It's not completely obvious. But I mean, if you compare this to the traditional approach, you also have to deal with twists. Okay, so maybe you will have to test 2 curves. The same problems arise. No. Here I only work in terms of moduli. Okay, so twist is somewhere else, and so the same problems will arise, and that's it.
Okay, so let's thanks Francois again for this.